And finally, I travel. To me, I really I enjoy traveling. You can go on many, many trips. There's lots of conferences and workshops and seminars all over. I mean, this year, I limited travel this year because I have an infant daughter. So I went on actually 12 trips, which are my limited travel, including New York and DC. I'm going to France this summer. I turned down trips to Moscow, Barcelona, South Africa, Egypt just this year. And believe me, that was really hard to do. It's a sacrifice for family. But you actually get to explore the world and meet people in your community around the world. So these are sort of things that I really like about what I do. Okay, so how did I get here and what advice do I have? I hope that was some motivation that inspires, that tells you that, this is sort of a good place to be, right? It's a good field to be in. And so, how do you get to a place like this? Well, I'm going to go on now into something of my personal background, of my career trajectory. And I just like to put it in some framework of I've thought about what advice do I have? What are the general things that I've sort of tried to consistently think about in my life? And I've limited them to 4 things here. The first one is just work hard. I feel like I've always worked really hard. There's no substitute for hard work, right? If something is difficult for you, you have a choice of working harder at it or trying to do something that's easier. I remember when I was in the 7th grade, I was taking an advanced math class. It was a year ahead of me for the 7th grade, and I remember this distinctly. It was really hard, and I went home and I said, "Mom, it's too hard. I'm getting a C in this class. I don't like it. It's hard for me. I don't want to do it anymore." And she said, "I'd rather see you get a C in this class than an A in an easier class. You can do this, and you have to just try." And it was a really pivotal moment for me because I realized that I was only limited by how hard I was willing to work to realize what potential I truly had, right? If you're not willing to work hard, you're not going to see your potential. And that's really key for a lot of what you do. So hard work. Try to do what most interests you. Again, these are sort of related. You're willing to work hard at something that's interesting, right? It's much easier to work hard at something that you like than something you don't like. The key word here is what most interests you. Not what interests you all the time. Nothing's going to be, very rarely is something going to be always interesting. But what's interesting a lot of the time, enough to keep you motivated. Be yourself, but always be professional. You don't need to change yourself to go into a field like the sciences where maybe you don't feel like you have a lot of role models or mentors or people like you. If you find yourself in a situation you're one of the few, you don't need to be like everyone else around you. You can be yourself. And I add a caveat, always be professional, right? Look around you. You do need to socialize with the people you work with. You do need to fit in somehow. You do need to keep a professional demeanor all the time, and that's really crucial for all these fields. And finally, throughout life, I consistently ask myself, am I comfortable with the worst case scenario? Right? Let's say that you're thinking of going to graduate school and you don't know whether you should go to graduate school or to get a job. Okay, how do you decide that? Well, okay, if you go to graduate school and you don't like it, what's the worst that's going to happen? Well, then you get a job. You're back where you were before. It's not that bad, right? Another example, I forgot it. But there are lots of cases like that where you can imagine where it seems like a very stressful choice, right? You're not sure, do I take this job? Do I take that job? What career path do I take? Choose the one that you think is best for yourself. Think to yourself, what's the worst case that's going to happen? And in my case, do I have kids before tenure? Do I wait till afterwards and then maybe I won't get tenure at all? Well, in the worst case in that case, if I wait until tenure, then I don't have kids at all. I wasn't happy with that, right? And if I do it before tenure, then maybe I won't get tenure. That's okay if that's the worst case. Think to yourself, what's the worst that'll happen? And you'll realize it's not that bad. Just sort of go for what you want to do in that case. Okay, so those are my 4 bits of advice. I'm just going to go on a little bit into more pictures of me and my background. So you've already heard an outline of this. I was born in New York City, lived in DC through 9th grade. I was in Houston for a few years. I was always interested in math science. I was also just a big jock in grade school and in high school. I did gymnastics very seriously at an elite level. I worked in Bella Caroli's gym. After that, I ran track. I was high school track captain. I ran 7 or 8 events, I think. I think that sports, things like that, it's okay to follow your interest in other areas. And in my case, things like sports were really good at keeping me focused, at reminding me, keeping focus, taught perseverance, the importance of hard work. In fact, I remember in college, I ran track for a year, and then I thought, oh, this is keeping me away from my studies. I really shouldn't run. I should just do research. And then, of course, I filled in the time after that just for, when I ran, I was so organized. I was like, at the gym, and I was doing my homework and doing all these things. And when I quit, I don't know what I did. I just wasn't organized. I wasn't in shape either, so it's worst case, right? So, you can do other things. Although, I should say at lunch today, I heard from a young man who's maybe here that in high school he did 5 different sports events, 5 different sports like football and basketball and track and something else. You can do too much. So just be aware that you don't want to take away from your studies, but it's okay to do other things. I was always interested in math and science. I used to do math word books for fun, sort of SAT sort of questions. I had a lot of support from my parents and some teachers in this, not everyone. I didn't have a strong physics background in high school. I didn't even have that strong a science background in high school. I just liked it. One of the key things for me was a summer internship in a biochemistry lab. I think you can see me there when I was a junior in high school. From that experience, I realized that I didn't like biochemistry at all, but I really liked experimental science. So the pipettes and stuff, I don't know, any chemistry, biochem people here? Someone, yeah, no, just not for me, that's all. It wasn't, you have to, beakers and stuff, I don't know. So, but I really liked working in a lab, and so that was, I'll go on to summer experiences and stuff, but just that experience in a lab was a big motivator, realizing I could do something that was fun and that I liked with my life. Okay, so I went to college after that. At that point, I knew that I wanted to do experimental science. I thought I did. I wasn't sure what area to go into. I mean, once again, I try to work against the stereotype that everyone who goes on in science knew from high school, had a really strong science background in high school and knew they wanted to be a chemistry PhD and go on into academia from the time they were 5, and they went right into college doing that. That's not usually the case, I don't think, right? I sort of knew I liked science. I didn't know what I liked best, so I just took a lot of courses. I took freshman year math, chemistry, physics, biology, right, and just saw what happened. And it turned out that bio was sort of interesting. Chemistry I didn't like so much until we got to the atomic shells. That was really cool, the physical chemistry, right? And physics was cool all the way through. So that sort of made up my mind that physics, the way that you understand things in physics was a way that I wanted to understand the world, that appealed to me. So you guys can find your own things that appeal to you and the way you want to think about the world. But it's nice to just look around and try to find these things. Physics wasn't easiest for me. Again, it wasn't the field that I felt like I could go into and just get all A's right away. It was interesting, and I knew I liked to work in it. I liked experimental science, but it wasn't the thing that was really easy. In fact, it was hard. Science is hard, especially in college. I remember one time when I was in college and I spent an all-nighter at the physics library, doing a problem set, a really hard problem set, and I was there until 3 in the morning, maybe 6 or 7 hours just working on this thing. And I dragged myself home. I remember walking through the quad and I was going back to my dorm. And there are these bright lights in one of the dorms that I passed by. And I sort of looked in like a deer in headlight thing. And I saw these guys. It was a Tuesday night, right? These guys playing pool and drinking beer. And I thought, they're not physics majors. I bet they're not in the sciences at all. They're living differently from me. They're not doing this. And it wasn't an unpleasant thing. It was just you realize that there are differences. I was working harder at that point than they were. It was harder for me. And you have to think long term. At the end of the day, they wanted to do something different from what I wanted to do. Maybe they wanted to go on to business school, or maybe they had parents who are wealthy. I don't know, right? But if I wanted to take my path, I had to be willing to accept that I was working harder, that it was going to be unfun sometimes, that I had to work now to pay off in the longer term. And just remember that when you're slogging through these things in college, it's a long-term thing. You can be discouraged now, but don't let that change your mind about what you're doing, right? Don't let the threat of hard work or other people having easier time make decisions for you now.